The hospital smelled like disinfectant and microwaved food, the kind of smell that clings to your clothes and follows you to the car. I noticed it when I turned on the heater and the warm air started circulating. A hallway smell, a waiting smell, plastic scrubbed too clean. Gary didn't say anything. He sat staring out the passenger window while I pulled out of the parking lot, the headlights sweeping over the thin snow that had already coated the asphalt in a layer thin as paper. It was 7:20 at night. The doctor had said things I was still trying to sort out in my head. Not new things exactly. My father's situation wasn't new. But there's a difference between knowing something is getting worse and hearing a man in a white coat describe the pace of it with words that sound too clinical for what they're actually saying. Gary kept asking questions. I stood by the window in the room, looking down at the parking lot, at the snow-covered cars, thinking I needed to check the brake fluid level before winter locked in for good. That's how my head works. Always has been. "You should have taken the 53, Gary said when we'd been on County Road 4 for about 15 minutes. The 53 was backed up on the way there. On the way there, it was a different time. I didn't answer. Gary was 5 years older than me and had been using that as an argument since I was a kid. This certainty that more time alive meant more accuracy in small decisions, like which road to take, where to park, what to order at a restaurant. I'd learned to let it go, not because I agreed, but because it wasn't worth the energy. The snow was picking up. Not dramatically, not the kind of blizzard that shuts down roads and makes the news, but the steady, quiet kind that accumulates without warning, turning the shoulder into something uncertain, erasing the line between the lane and whatever wasn't lane anymore. The headlights lit up maybe 20 feet ahead, and then the dark closed back in. On both sides of the road, the forest was thick and black, the pines carrying snow on their lower branches, the tree line starting right at the edge of the shoulder. This road I knew. I'd driven it hundreds of times over the last 6 years, since my father moved to that part of Minnesota after he retired. It was mostly straight, with 2 long curves before the edge of town. No streetlights past a certain point, but decent signage. In the summer, it was almost pleasant. In the winter, it was just functional. "Did you talk to the nurse about the medication schedule?" I asked. "I did. And?" "She said it's department protocol, which means it's not changing. Which means it's not changing," Gary repeated, with that worn-out inflection I could never tell was sadness or frustration. I stayed quiet. The heater hummed low. The windshield wiper beat at the interval I'd set before leaving. Fast enough for the snow, slow enough not to wear out the blade. I was doing 35 miles an hour under the limit because the road had started to build up at the edges, and I didn't trust the car's traction at this level of snow. Gary checked his phone, then went quiet, then said, "Signal's gone. Normal out here in this stretch." "Since when?" "Always been like that a little further up. Comes back when we turn toward town." He put the phone in his pocket and went back to looking out the window. I could see his reflection in the glass. Not the expression, just the outline, the jaw, the forehead. And I thought about my father lying in that bed with the tubes in his arm, thinner than the last time, his voice weaker, his eyes drifting in and out during the conversation, like holding focus took an effort he just didn't have anymore. Not something I wanted to think about while driving. Then the branch fell. It wasn't a small branch. From the sound of it, it had to be a mid-sized limb, pine heavy with snow. It came down behind the car, outside the range of the mirrors, with a dull crack that echoed more than I expected. Gary turned around instinctively. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw nothing but dark road and falling snow. "That was a branch," I said. "I know what it was." The wiper started to squeak a couple minutes later. Not a constant squeak. Intermittent, like a rubber blade dragging across a dry spot on the glass at one specific point in its arc. I'd adjust the spray when I got home. I made a mental note. That's when I saw it. On the left side of the road, along the edge where the shoulder met the tree line, there was a dark shape. It wasn't an animal standing still. It was movement, something tracking alongside the car at an angle that didn't match anything I knew from that area. It wasn't the way a deer moves, stopping, watching, bolting. It wasn't a bear, which pulls away. It was a lateral keeping pace tight against the tree line, fast enough to hold its distance while I was doing 35 miles an hour. I lifted my foot off the gas without realizing it. "What is it?" Gary asked. "Nothing," I said. But I kept watching the left side mirror longer than I should have. The snow falling through the cone of the rear tail light. The tree line still and dark again, as if nothing had moved out there at all. I'm not the type to do that. To conjure things on a dark road. To turn an animal at the edge of the woods into something else just because I'm tired and my head is full. I worked 6 years on the night shift at a plant where half the stories the guys told in the locker room were about seeing something in the yard, in the machine corridor, at the discharge line at 3 in the morning. There was always an explanation. Shadow from a forklift. Reflection off a flashlight. Human eyes reading a pattern where there is no pattern. Because that's what human eyes do when they're exhausted and in the dark. So I kept driving. 35 miles an hour. The wipers squeaking at that one specific point in its arc. The fine snow going horizontal for a second when the wind crossed the road and then falling straight again. Gary had reclined his seat slightly and was sitting with his arms crossed, that posture I recognized from when we were kids. Not sleeping, just shutting down. I checked the left side mirror 3 times over the next 5 minutes. The first time, just snow and darkness. The second time, the tree line the same. Still, the pines with snow on the lower branches forming those low shapes that can be anything if you need them to be something. The third time, I'd almost convinced myself it had been a large deer, maybe a young moose, which did exist in the area, moving parallel to the road for some reason and disappearing into the woods. That makes sense. It happens. "Are you going to tell Carol?" Gary asked without opening his eyes. Carol was my ex-wife. She and my father had a good relationship, the kind that survives a divorce because the affection was genuine and wasn't tied to the marriage. She texted him on his birthday. He asked about her when I came to visit. "I'll send her a message when I get home," I said. "She'd want to know right away." "I know. So why wait until you get home?" I breathed in slowly through my nose. "Because there's no signal out here, Gary." He didn't answer. I could hear his breathing, steady, and the heater, and the wiper, and the snow against the windshield, and the sound of the tires on the thin layer building up on the road. The car sat heavy in the snow. It was an old Explorer I kept because I knew every sound it made and what each sound meant. Reliable. Nothing about it worried me. It was on the long curve, the first of the 2 before town, that I saw it again. This time, it wasn't along the tree line. It was further ahead on the right side, where the forest pulled back a few yards from the shoulder before closing in again. The thing was in the strip of open ground between the road and the pines, and it was still. I passed it in maybe 2 seconds, long enough to register size, bigger than it should have been, whatever it was, and a posture that wasn't an animal standing still watching traffic. It wasn't upright, wasn't holding its head up. It was low, its weight distributed in a way that read as tension, not rest. Dark. Snow falling on it without it moving. 2 seconds. Then the curve, the pines closing in, the rear view showing nothing but road. I didn't say anything to Gary. I ran the numbers in my head the way I do when I need to work through a mechanical problem without panicking. What I had seen, a large, dark, low, motionless shape on the right side of the road, in an open area. What it could be, bear. Unlikely at this hour and in this snow, but not impossible. Moose, the size worked, but the posture didn't. A fallen trunk with snow on top, yes, possible. My perception off from the fatigue and the speed. A fallen trunk doesn't pace alongside the car through a stretch of dense forest. I adjusted my hands on the wheel. I was gripping harder than I needed to. Gary. Did you see anything on the side of the road just now? He opened his eyes, looked ahead, then to the side. Just road and forest. When? Just now on the curve. Right side. Didn't see anything. A pause. What do you think you saw? I don't know. Big animal, I think. He stared out the window for a few seconds, that way he has of sizing something up before he speaks. Moose, probably. There's a lot of them in this stretch. Probably. But a moose has a silhouette you recognize. The long legs, the neck, the rack if it's a male. What I had seen didn't have those proportions. It was wider than it was tall, with a profile I kept trying to match to something and couldn't. Not that I was going to say that to Gary. He already had his head somewhere else. With my father, with the doctors, with that hospital hallway. And turning two sightings into a conversation I didn't know how to finish wasn't going to help either one of us. So I stayed quiet and drove. The snow picked up a little over the next few minutes. Not much, but enough for me to drop to 30 miles an hour and switch on the traction mode in the Explorer. The wiper squeaked. The heater hummed. Gary closed his eyes again. I looked at the left side mirror. The tree line was dark and still. Snow piled on the lower branches, the kind of image you see on a Minnesota calendar. Beautiful and cold, and nothing inside it. For about 40 seconds, nothing. Then, not in the trees, but on the shoulder, closer than before. Movement. Fast. The kind of motion you can't be sure you actually saw, or whether your brain assembled it from the reflection of the tail lights on the snow. I lifted my foot off the gas again. This time I didn't put it back. The Explorer slowed on its own while I held my foot suspended between the two pedals, watching the side mirror and seeing nothing but snow and dark asphalt, and the tree line giving nothing back. 28 miles an hour. 25. Gary noticed before he said anything. Felt the change in the car's rhythm with that passenger sense you develop after years of being driven by other people. Why are you slowing down? I'm not braking. I just took my foot off. Why? I put my foot back on the gas carefully, no rush, and the Explorer picked up speed gradually. I thought I saw something on the shoulder. Gary sat up straighter. Where? It's already passed. He looked at his side mirror, then turned his body to look out the rear window. Just snow falling in the cone of the tail light, the road disappearing around the curve behind us. He looked for about 5 seconds, then settled back into position without saying anything. The silence that settled between us was different from before. Before it had been the silence of two tired brothers after a bad day at a hospital. This one had a different texture, more alert, a little tighter at the edges. How many sightings? Gary asked. 2, maybe 3, maybe. The first one I'm not sure about. The other 2, yes. He processed that. Gary worked in risk management for an insurance company in Minneapolis and had that way of listening that always seemed to be converting information into probability. It wasn't a bad thing. It was just how he operated. Same animal? I don't know. Couldn't get a good enough look to compare. Large, yes, but you don't know what it is. No. He looked out the side window. The forest moved past, dark and dense. The snow had picked up a little more. It wasn't coming down hard. It was coming down steady. The kind that doesn't carry any drama but just keeps covering everything without stopping. The shoulder had enough accumulation to erase the painted line. I was driving down the center of the lane using the trees as a lateral reference. Slow down a little more, Gary said. I'm already at 30. Get it down to 25. I did. Not because he asked, because it made sense given the condition of the road. But I didn't say that. We went another 3 minutes without talking. The wiper squeaked through its arc. I was checking both side mirrors at a frequency I knew wasn't normal for a road trip. I didn't see anything in that stretch. Just forest, snow, the reflection of our own taillights on the snow piled up on the shoulder. I started thinking it really had just been the fatigue. Derek! Gary's voice was low and different. What? Left side. I looked at the left side mirror before looking out the window. Driver's instinct. In the mirror, I saw the tail light's reflection lighting up a strip of shoulder in the beginning of the tree line. And inside that strip, about 15 yards behind us, there was a shape. It wasn't a partial shape this time. It was whole, within the tail light's reach. And it was moving. Not running, but trotting, at a pace that kept a constant distance from the car. The size didn't match anything. It was wide, low relative to its length, with a movement that had too much fluidity for the weight it seemed to carry. I held 25 miles an hour. You seeing this? Gary asked. I am. What is that? It wasn't a question. It was him thinking out loud, which Gary almost never did, and that unsettled me more than the dark shape in the mirror. Keep watching, I said. Tell me if anything changes. I needed eyes on the rear window while I kept my attention on the road. The snow was bad enough that any distraction was a real problem. Gary turned his body again and watched through the rear window with both hands braced on the back of the seat. 30 seconds, 1 minute. Still back there, he said, holding its distance. How far? About 20 yards, maybe less now. Less now. I brought it up to 35 gradually, feeling the tires in the snow, reading the grip. The Explorer responded well. I checked the mirror. The shape had fallen back for a few seconds and then returned to the same distance. It kept up, Gary said without me asking. I saw. The second long curve was about a quarter mile ahead. After that, another 4 miles of straight road and we'd be in town. I was running that calculation. Miles, speed, time. When the Explorer gave a light shudder, the kind of hesitation I recognized from the automatic transmission when something was off with the temperature sensor. Not serious, but not a good time. Is the car okay? Gary asked. Yes. A pause. Probably. He turned to look at me. Probably. It's a transmission thing that sometimes happens in hard cold. It's happened before. It passes. And if it doesn't pass, I didn't answer right away because I was watching the dashboard. Engine temperature normal, oil pressure normal, no lights on. The transmission had steadied. The Explorer was tracking straight, 25 miles an hour again because I'd eased off the gas without noticing. If it doesn't pass, we stop and I take a look, I said. Gary held his eyes on me for a second. Then he turned back to the rear window. Derek, he said in that low voice again. What? It's gone. I looked in the mirror. Empty shoulder, still tree line, snow falling. I didn't feel relief. I felt the back of my neck go stiff because some part of me already knew that gone wasn't the same as away. The second curve came and went without trouble. The Explorer held well, the tires reading the snow with the traction on. And for a couple of minutes I almost believed the straight road ahead was going to carry us right into the town lights without anything else happening. The road was empty in both directions. Not a single car since we'd left the hospital. No farmhouse lights visible through the trees. Just the white strip of the lane and the snow falling in the headlight beams. The Explorer stopped moving on the next mile. It wasn't dramatic. No collision, no skid. No transmission giving out for good. It was a gradual loss of traction where the shoulder had crept onto the road over a stretch of about 10 feet. Snow piled on top of a layer of ice I didn't see in time. The tires spun, the car drifted slightly to the right, and I corrected calmly. But the correction pushed the Explorer onto the soft shoulder and it sank about 6 inches before it stopped. Engine running. Wheels spinning with nothing to grab onto. I switched off the traction mode, switched it back on, tried reversing carefully. The rear right wheel spun in the loose snow. I tried going forward. Same thing. We're stuck, Gary said. I know. I told you to take the 53. I breathed deep and said nothing. I put it in neutral and sat with my hands on the wheel, thinking. The procedure was simple. Get out, check how deep we were in, see if there was enough grip on the front wheels to pull out with some momentum, or if I'd need sand or a push. I had a folding shovel in the trunk, had kept it there since October. I'd done this before in similar conditions. The problem was I didn't want to get out of the car. Not in a clear way, not in any way I could explain to Gary without sounding like I'd lost my mind. It was a physical resistance, the kind that shows up before thought, that makes you hesitate before opening a door without knowing why. I sat there longer than I needed to, staring through the windshield at the empty road and the snow falling in the headlight reach. I'm going to have to check the wheels, I said. I know. You stay here. Gary looked at me sideways. Why? Because someone needs to be at the wheel in case I need some gas. It was true, but it wasn't the whole reason. The whole reason I wasn't going to explain. I left the engine running, the heater going, and opened the door. The cold came in like a physical pressure, -18 with a wind chill of -25. That Minnesota cold that doesn't warn you, that's simply there with its full weight the moment you open any barrier against it. The snow crunched under my boot when I stepped onto the shoulder. I stood still for a moment with my hand on the open door. The road was quiet. I mean quiet in the way a snow-covered road at night always is. But this quiet had a different quality. No wind in that moment. No sound of any animal. No crack of a branch or drop of snow built up on the pines. The kind of silence that isn't the absence of sound, but the absence of movement. As if everything was waiting, I closed the door and went to check the wheels. The rear right had sunk about 8 inches into soft snow over what felt like dirt shoulder rather than asphalt. The front right was at the edge, with reasonable grip. If I could get something under the rear wheel and Gary accelerated slowly with 4-wheel drive engaged, there was a chance we could get out without the shovel. I went to the trunk, opened it, found the shovel, and also a bag of sand I'd forgotten was still back there from last year. Sand was better. While I was opening the bag and working it under the rear wheel, on my knees in the snow with my hands going cold even through my gloves, I heard a sound. It was low. It came from the forest on the left side of the road, which at that spot had about 25 feet of open shoulder before it closed into pines. It wasn't wind. Wind has a rhythm, a rise and fall. This sound was continuous and organic. Heavy breathing, the kind of volume that implies sighs coming out at regular intervals I could have counted if I'd wanted to. I didn't stand up right away. I held the same position, hands under the wheel, and just stopped moving. The breathing continued, about 50 feet away, maybe less. I stood up slowly, turned slowly. I didn't see anything. The tree line was dark and still, snow on the low branches, no visible shape on the open shoulder. But the sound kept on, now with something added, something that took me a few seconds to place because I hadn't expected to hear it. A slow, periodic creak, like pressure on cartilage. The kind of sound a large animal makes when it shifts its weight from one foot to another. It was standing there, still enough not to be seen, close enough to be heard. I knocked twice on the car's side window with my wrist, without taking my eyes off the tree line. Gary cracked the window 3 inches. Engage 4-wheel drive and accelerate slowly when I knock 3 times, I said, my voice low and flat. What? Gary, 4-wheel drive. 3 knocks. A pause. Okay. I poured the rest of the sand under the wheel without crouching back down. Did it standing up, leaning over without losing my line of sight to the forest. The breathing had stopped. The creaking had stopped. The silence came back with that same dense quality as before. I didn't know if that was better or worse. I knocked 3 times on the window. The Explorer groaned. The wheels hunted for grip for 2 seconds that felt longer, and then it lurched off the shoulder in a way that made me step sideways to avoid getting clipped. I pulled open the rear passenger door, tossed the shovel onto the seat, and got into the front in under 4 seconds. Closed the door. Locked it. Go, I said. What was go, Gary? He went. The Explorer found the road. The tires hit asphalt under the snow and we accelerated. I watched the left side mirror until the stretch of open shoulder disappeared behind the curve. No movement. Nothing visible. Just the snow falling and the silence it makes when it covers everything, including the sounds you'd rather not have heard. Gary didn't ask again what had happened out there. I knew him well enough to know his silence wasn't disinterest. It was processing. He drove with both hands on the wheel, which Gary almost never did, and I sat in the passenger seat trying to warm my fingers in the heater vent, thinking about breathing. The problem with breathing is you can't unhear it. I'd spent 6 years in a plant where the machinery sounds were so constant. You learned to filter, to separate background noise from noise that meant something was wrong. You develop a kind of selective hearing. You stop hearing what's normal and start hearing only what's off. The sound out there wasn't machinery, but the principle was the same. I knew what I'd heard. I knew the volume. I knew the distance. It wasn't a small animal. It wasn't wind, it wasn't wood settling in the cold. How far? I asked. About 3 miles. 3 miles at 25 miles an hour in this snow was maybe 6 or 7 minutes. That seemed reasonable. That seemed manageable. I kept repeating it to myself as if repetition could turn an estimate into a certainty. The snow got worse. Not all at once. It was gradual, the kind of progression you notice with a delay. When you realize you're seeing 50 feet ahead instead of 65, and the difference built up without warning. Gary dropped to 20 miles an hour without me suggesting it. The wiper went to its highest setting, and the squeak in the arc became constant. A thin, periodic sound that started to get under my skin in a way I couldn't shake. That's when the Explorer started losing temperature. Not the engine, the inside. The heater was still running. The dashboard wasn't showing anything wrong, but the warm air coming through the vents had lost strength. Not dramatically, just enough for the side window on my side to start fogging at the edges. I wiped it with my jacket sleeve and kept an eye on it. "The heat's dropping," Gary said. I noticed. "What is it?" "Could be the blower. Sometimes when the temperature drops too fast, it reduces automatically to protect the engine. It'll come back on its own." Gary looked at the dashboard, then at his side window. The rear window's closing up. I turned around. The back window was fogging from the bottom up. That condensation that happens when the temperature difference between the inside and outside crosses a certain point. The rear defroster was on. I'd checked it when we left the hospital. But it wasn't keeping up with the rate the snow was cooling the glass from outside. We lost the rear view in under 2 minutes. Not completely. There was a narrow band in the center where the defroster was still working. About 6 inches of visibility, enough to make out light, but not shape. The side mirrors were still good, but the angle was limited, and the snow built up over the tail light had cut down how far the light reached. I sat there looking at that narrow strip of clear glass in the center of the rear window. "I need to get out and clear the rear window," I said. Gary looked at me. "No. Gary, no. We are not stopping again. 5 minutes, engine running. You spent 5 minutes out there just now and came back looking like you'd seen something you weren't telling me about." He kept his eyes on the road. "We're not stopping." I didn't answer right away because he wasn't wrong. I sat looking at what was left of the visibility in the rear window, at the white haze the tail light lit up in the snow, at the nothing I could see beyond it. Something hit the rear bumper. It wasn't a branch. A branch falls from above, makes an impact and a drag sound. This was different, lateral, deliberate, with a force I felt in the seat through the car's frame. A single, firm contact, and then nothing. Gary braked without meaning to, the Explorer dropping to 15 miles an hour before he realized it, and corrected. "What was that?" he said. Not a question. "Keep driving. Derek, keep driving, Gary." He brought it back up to 20. I sat staring at the narrow strip of clear glass in the rear window. The tail light haze, the nothing beyond it. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then, at the edge of the right side mirror, I caught a movement. Not on the shoulder, in the road. Behind us, inside the reach of the tail lights, there was a shape moving. Not trotting this time. Coming. "Speed up," I said. "I'm all ready. Speed up, Gary." He sped up. 25, 30. The shape in the right side mirror fell back for a few seconds, dropped out of the angle of view, and I switched to the left mirror. Nothing. Then back to the narrow strip in the rear window. White haze, short range, impossible to tell. "What did you see?" Gary asked. "In the road behind us." Silence. "In the road." "Yes." He didn't say anything for a moment. He was connecting the line between what had stayed outside when we got stuck, the sound I clearly hadn't told him about, the way I'd looked when I got back in the car. I could see him drawing it together in his head. "Derek, what was it you heard out there?" "Breathing." "From what?" "I don't know." "Do you have any idea?" "No." That was a partial lie. I had fragments, the size implied by the volume, the distance, the way it had moved that I'd seen in the mirrors. But fragments aren't an identification, and I wasn't going to build a creature in Gary's head out of 3 bad sightings and a sound in the dark. Not yet. The wiper kept squeaking. The heater stayed weak. The rear window stayed sealed in white haze with that narrow strip in the center that wasn't telling me anything useful. 2.5 miles to town. I kept watching the right side mirror with a regularity that wasn't monitoring anymore. It was something else. The involuntary attention of someone who knows they won't be able to stop looking, that their eyes will keep going back to that mirror regardless of what the brain decides. The third time I looked, there was something on the right shoulder, still, at the edge of where the tail light reached before the darkness took over. still and looking. I didn't say anything to Gary. I held my eyes on the mirror for 3 more seconds, fixing in my mind what I could make out. The shape, the proportions, the posture, before the growing distance erased it in the snow. 3 seconds was enough for me to stop thinking about Moose. There's a difference between seeing poorly and seeing wrong. Seeing poorly is distance, bad angle, not enough light, your brain filling in the gaps with what it knows. You see a shape, and your brain offers horse, offers bear, offers fallen trunk, offers whatever's in the inventory of things you've seen before that fit the context. It's an automatic process. You don't even notice it happening. Seeing wrong is different. That's when your brain runs through the options and none of them fit. When the shape in front of your eyes has no match in the inventory. It's not that it's too big or too small. It's that the proportions are distributed in a way that has no reference. And your brain keeps trying, discarding, trying again, and you're left standing there with that feeling that something fundamental isn't connecting. That's what happened when I saw the animal for the first time. Really saw it. Gary had slowed to 15 miles an hour because the snow was thick, and visibility had dropped to less than 50 feet ahead. We were about 2 miles from town, on a straight stretch of road with dense forest on both sides, and a wide shoulder on the right where there was a pull-off. A gravel strip covered in snow with a metal trash can and an unlit marker post. Gary was watching the road ahead with the concentration of someone reading the pavement inch by inch. I was watching the right side mirror. The thing came out of the forest at that pull-off. It didn't run. It crossed the space between the pines and the gravel with a stride that had too much efficiency for its size. 4 points of contact, weight shifted forward, head low and level with the body, without the side-to-side sway a large animal normally carries when it walks slowly. It stopped at the edge of the gravel, about 15 feet from the shoulder, and held still while the explorer went past. I had about 2.5 seconds of visibility. The tail light covered that strip, and the snow wasn't coming down hard enough to distort. Here's what I saw. It was larger than anything I was calibrated to see on that road. Not larger the way a moose is larger than a deer. Larger the way something is larger when you weren't built to account for it when you left the house. The body was long and wide, with a musculature at the shoulder and neck that gave the impression of weight concentrated in the front, as if the center of gravity sat higher than the height of the haunches suggested. The front legs were longer than the rear ones, which created that downward slope in the back that I'd been seeing at a distance and hadn't been able to name. The coat was dark, not black, but the kind of very deep brown that goes black in poor light. And it was wet with snow, matted flat against the body in uneven patches. The head was large, long snout, not flat. The ears, which I saw for less than a second before the angle closed, were laid back flat against the skull. I didn't see the eyes. I didn't look for the eyes. What I couldn't fit together was the overall configuration, the whole of its parts. Each piece on its own had a possible reference. Together, the animal wasn't any of those references. It was something using recognizable components to assemble a shape that didn't exist in my inventory. And that's what stayed with me. After the angle closed and the pull-off disappeared behind us in the snow, not the size, not the coat, but that feeling of incompatibility, of looking at something my brain kept refusing as a valid option. "You saw it," Gary said. It wasn't a question. "I saw it," I said. "What is it?" I stayed quiet for a few seconds. The Explorer was still doing 15 miles an hour, the snow hitting the windshield steadily, the wiper on its highest setting. My hands were resting on my knee, not gripping, just set down there as if they needed some solid surface. "I don't know, Derek. I don't know, Gary. It's nothing I recognize." He went quiet, kept driving. I looked in the right side mirror and saw only snow and the dark tree line going past. I looked at the narrow strip in the rear window and saw the white haze of the taillight and nothing beyond it. "It was big," Gary said finally. "It was. Bigger than a bear. Yes. But the shape wasn't. No, it wasn't." He stopped talking, tightened his grip on the wheel. I knew what was happening because it was happening to me too. You try to build a sentence that describes what you saw. and the sentence won't close because the word that should sit at the center of it doesn't exist in the vocabulary you have available for that road in that state in that winter. You're left with fragments. Wide, dark, too fast for its weight, head low, ears back. Followed the car for miles, hit the bumper, stood at the pull-off watching while we drove past. 2 miles, Gary said in the voice of someone anchoring themselves to a concrete fact, because everything else is starting to slip. 2 miles, I repeated. The heater had come back to full strength at some point in the last few minutes, and the inside of the car was warm again, but I hadn't noticed until now. The back of my neck was stiff. I was sitting slightly leaned forward without having decided to do that. Gary brought it up to 20 miles an hour, then 25. The snow was a little thinner in this stretch, the road more readable. The headlights lit up the straight ahead, and for almost a full minute there was nothing but snow-covered asphalt and forest, and the steady rhythm of the snow. Then the Explorer started losing speed. It wasn't Gary braking. It was the engine responding differently. A subtle hesitation in the automatic transmission that I recognized before I even looked at the dashboard. The same symptom as before, but more drawn out this time, as if the temperature sensor had decided the problem was real and not temporary. An orange light came on in the dashboard. Gary looked at me. I looked at the light. "Pull onto the shoulder," I said, in a voice more even than I expected. "Derek, carefully, slow. On the shoulder." He pulled over. Engine running but rough. The orange light pulsing low on the dashboard. 2 miles from town. I sat looking ahead for a few seconds, at the snow falling in the headlight reach, at the empty straight road that led nowhere visible from where we were. Then I looked at the right side mirror. The pull-off was about 200 yards behind us. The snow-covered gravel was empty. But the pines at the edge of the forest, at the exact spot where the thing had come out, were moving. Not from wind. The wind had died down. They were moving the way vegetation moves when something large passes through it from the inside, unhurried, coming in our direction. I didn't say anything about the pines. Gary was staring at the dashboard, at the orange light with the concentration of someone trying to solve a mechanical problem they don't understand through sheer force of will. I let him stare. There were about 30 seconds before the thing came out of the tree line. If it held the pace it had kept until now, and I needed to use those 30 seconds thinking, not explaining. The engine problem I knew. It was the transmission temperature sensor, which in extreme cold sometimes locked onto a false reading and forced the system to cut power as a safeguard. Most of the time it resolved by shutting off, waiting 2 minutes, restarting. I'd done it once before 2 winters ago on a better road than this one, in daylight with nothing around. 2 minutes with the engine off meant 2 minutes without heat. It also meant 2 more minutes sitting still than I wanted. "It's the transmission sensor," I said. "We need to shut the engine off for 2 minutes and restart." Gary looked at me. 2 minutes. Probably less, but 2 to be safe. He looked at the rearview mirror. I followed his eyes. The narrow strip of clear glass in the rear window showed the white haze of the tail light and nothing else. And the side mirrors showed the empty road and the tree line on both sides. The pines at the right edge had stopped moving. Not because the thing had stopped, because it had come out of the forest. I saw it in the right side mirror. Not the full shape, just the movement on the shoulder, about 150 yards back, entering the taillight's reach and leaving it in under 2 seconds, crossing to the left side of the road with that wide, efficient stride I already knew. It disappeared into the forest on the opposite side. It crossed the road. It was flanking us. "Kill the engine," I said. "Derek, kill it now, Gary. 2 minutes and we're out of here." He killed it. The heater stopped. The wipers stopped. The engine sound dropped away, and the silence that took its place was a different kind from all the silences earlier that night. It was the silence of being inside a metal box sitting in the middle of an empty road, with forest on both sides and none of our own noise left to cover what was out there. We listened. For almost a minute, nothing. The snow tapped against the roof with that soft, continuous sound of fine static. I could hear Gary's breathing, steady but a little faster than normal. I could hear my own, which I was controlling deliberately, without having decided to do that. Then came the sound of the footsteps, Not in the snow on the shoulder, in the snow on the road, which was thinner there and made a different sound, sharper, less muffled. Long, spaced steps, the kind of cadence that implies stride length, that implies size. Coming from the left side, passing in front of the car at a distance I estimated at about 25 feet by the volume, continuing to the right side. Gary had his hand on the gear shift. I placed my hand on his arm slowly and held it. He looked at me. I gave the smallest shake of my head. Not yet. He moved his hand off the gear shift. The footsteps stopped. We sat still. The windshield was starting to lose temperature, condensation forming along the upper edges, and I knew in another minute the visibility would start to go. I looked at the dashboard clock before the screen went dark with the engine off. 1 minute and 20 seconds had passed. On the right side of the car, about 10 feet from the front right bumper, something made contact with the body panel. It wasn't a hit. It was contact, slow, continuous pressure against the front fender, the kind you feel more than hear. A vibration that travels through the car's frame and reaches the seat. It lasted about 4 seconds. Then it stopped. Gary was rigid. I kept my hand on his arm. The contact came back, this time further back and on the front passenger door, at window height. Steady pressure for about 3 seconds, then a slow drag toward the rear bumper, as if something was moving along the car and letting its flank brush against the body panels. I didn't look out his window. I looked at the windshield straight ahead and stayed quiet. And the only thing I was thinking with any clarity was that the Explorer's body panels were less than 1/8 of an inch thick, and that the distance between what was outside and the inside of the car was exactly that. 1/8 of an inch of steel, 1/4 inch of tempered glass, and the locking mechanism I'd triggered on instinct when I got in. The drag stopped. Silence. 40 seconds. Then, from outside, in the snow on the road, a sound that took me a moment to place because I hadn't expected it. Not footsteps, not breathing, but a slow and deliberate creak. The same one I'd heard on the shoulder when I was working to get us unstuck. Pressure on cartilage, weight redistributing. Stopped less than 6 feet from the front bumper. Gary opened his mouth. I tightened my grip on his arm before any sound came out. We stayed like that for 30 more seconds that were the longest 30 seconds I can remember living through. The creaking continued, periodic, the way an animal sounds when it's waiting without agitation, without anxiety, with the patience of something that has no reason to be in a hurry. Then it stopped. The footsteps started again, pulling away this time. To the left, back toward the shoulder, back in the direction of the forest. Spaced, slow, unhurried. I waited another 20 seconds after the last footstep faded out. "Start it," I said. Gary started the engine. It caught on the first try. The sensor had reset. The orange light went out. He put it in drive before the engine had warmed up enough, and I didn't say anything about that. We accelerated. Gary pushed to 40 miles an hour in the snow, which was reckless, and I let him. I kept watching the mirrors, both of them, alternating for over a minute. The road behind us was empty. The tree line on both sides was still. "What was that?" Gary said. His voice came out different, thinner, higher in his throat. I took a few seconds to answer, not because I didn't know what to say, but because I was trying to decide how much of what I'd put together in my head during those 2 minutes of silence I was going to put into words right now. "What I saw at the pull-off," I said. "Crossed the road while we were stopped. Spent 2-3 minutes around the car. Then it left." Gary held his silence for a long time. The town was showing on the horizon, not the lights themselves yet, but the kind of diffuse brightness that snow reflects when there's city light beyond a hill. "It left," he said. "For now." Another silence. "Derek, what is that thing?" I looked at the glow on the horizon. Less than a mile. "I don't know," I said. And it was true, but it was a smaller truth than it sounded, because I'd spent the last 40 minutes watching an animal that didn't exist in my inventory make choices that animals don't make. Flanking, testing a perimeter, repositioning, waiting. And some part of me was starting to put together an answer I didn't want to finish putting together. The town lights appeared on the crest of the hill, and Gary accelerated toward them as if city light were a physical barrier, as if the street lights and the lit windows of distant houses could do something the Explorer's body panels hadn't. I understood the impulse. I was feeling my own version of it, that contraction toward the familiar, the known, the place where the rules of the world work the way you learned they work. But I kept watching the mirrors. The road behind us was empty. The tree line on both sides was still. The snow had eased a little, still falling but thinner, the kind that floats before it lands instead of falling with weight. The taillights lit up a longer stretch now, and for almost half a mile I could see the road with nothing on it but snow and asphalt. I started releasing the tension in my shoulders. That's when the Explorer gave its second lurch. Different from the first. It wasn't the transmission this time. It was a tire. I knew it from the way the wheel pulled right, from the vibration that came up through the chassis with that off-cadence rhythm of rubber that lost pressure too fast to be a slow leak. Gary corrected the wheel on instinct and slowed, the car drifting inevitably toward the shoulder, and I already knew before it came to a full stop what had happened. Rear right tire. Flat. Gary looked at me. I looked at the dashboard, at the mirrors, at the road behind us. Nothing. Spare, I said. I know where the spare is, Derek. I'll change it. You stay in the car. You're going to... Gary. I looked at him. I changed the tire. You stay in the car with the engine running, doors locked, and you don't open the door for any reason. Any reason. He looked at me for a second with that expression I'd known since we were kids. The older brother expression of someone calculating whether he has enough authority to push back and concluding he doesn't. He nodded once. I got out of the car. The cold got into my pores before it got through my clothes. I went straight to the trunk, opened it, pulled out the jack and the lug wrench without turning on the flashlight yet. I didn't want unnecessary light. Didn't want to announce our position any more than the headlights already were. The spare was secured under the false floor, that center bolt system that takes 40 seconds to release if you know what you're doing. I knew what I was doing. I went to the flat side, set the jack, started loosening the lug nuts before lifting the car. The right way. My fingers were working, the gloves gave enough grip on the wrench. I was working fast, not rushing. Rushing makes mistakes. Working fast just saves time. The forest was quiet, that was the problem. When there's wind, there's constant sound that covers everything and you don't have to listen. When there's no wind and fine snow is falling, the environment takes on that quality of a padded room, where every sound carries weight, where the difference between silence and presence is a matter of attention. I had my attention on everything at once. Fingers on the lug nuts, ears on the perimeter, eyes alternating between the work and the tree line about 40 feet to the right. Jack the car up, pull the flat. I had my hand on the spare when I heard Gary open the door. Not the click of the lock releasing, the sound of the hinge, the sound of cold air entering the warm interior. I was on my feet before I'd thought about it, hand still on the spare, and I saw Gary with the door open and one foot already on the shoulder. Gary, get back in the car. You need help. I don't need help. Get in. Derek, it's 2 minutes with another set of hands. Get in the car. Right now. But Gary was Gary. 5 years older. A lifetime of decisions made from the certainty that he knew better. That physical presence was a form of care. That sitting inside a car while his younger brother worked in the snow was something he simply couldn't bring himself to do. He put his second foot down. I dropped the spare. I moved toward him with the intention of pushing him back inside. No ceremony about it. The kind of physical contact we hadn't had in years. Grab the jacket, push, close the door. 4 yards between me and him. I was at the second yard when I saw the movement in the forest. Not a branch, not snow dropping from a limb. It was a displacement of mass, that disturbance in the vegetation I'd learned to recognize over the course of that night. And it was moving fast, about 100 feet to the right, coming in a straight line toward the shoulder. I shouted his name. Gary turned his head toward the forest before he turned toward me. And that second of looking the wrong way, was all there was between where he was and where I needed him to be. I reached him, grabbed his jacket with both hands, pulled with my full body weight thrown backward toward the open door. He came, partially. The impact came from his right side, not from the front. A lateral contact that caught Gary's right shoulder and arm and spun him out of my grip with a force that wasn't the speed of an attack. It was mass. It was the weight of something enormous moving on a trajectory that included him without needing to specifically target him. Gary hit the side of the car with his left shoulder and went down onto the shoulder. I was holding a fistful of his jacket. The thing kept moving. It didn't stop, didn't come back, continued across to the other side of the road with those wide strides I already knew, and disappeared into the left tree line with a crash of vegetation that lasted 2 seconds and then was gone. Gary was on the shoulder with his hand on his right shoulder. "Get up," I said. The voice that came out was strange, from somewhere I didn't recognize as mine. "Get up right now, Gary." He got up. I grabbed his arm, the left one, and pushed him inside the car, into the front passenger seat because that was the open door, and I closed the door and hit the lock and went around to the driver's side in 6 steps and got in and closed it and locked it. The spare was on the shoulder. The flat was still on the car. I put it in drive and went. The Explorer bounced and shuddered for the first few yards, the rim scraping against the asphalt under the snow, with that sound of metal on rock, and I held 20 miles an hour because 20 miles on a rim was better than sitting still, and the town was less than a mile away, and there was light on the horizon, and Gary was breathing in the seat beside me, with his hand still on his shoulder, and neither one of us had said a word since I'd shouted his name. I didn't look in the mirrors. For the first time that night, I didn't look in the mirrors. The rim held for a quarter mile. I knew it wasn't going to hold much longer than that. Metal against asphalt has a physical limit, and that limit is measured in friction and heat and progressive deformation. And when a rim collapses, it doesn't warn you. It simply stops functioning as a support structure, and the car drops to one side in a lurch that has no possible correction. That's what happened. The Explorer tilted right, the rear bumper scraped the asphalt, and I let the car die on the shoulder, because the alternative was losing control completely. We stopped less than 600 yards from the first houses. I could see the lights. Not many. It was full dark on a city-edge street. The kind of street with spaced-out lampposts and houses with yellow windows set back from the road. No movement, no cars. But they were real lights, fixed. The kind that don't disappear and don't move. 600 yards in a straight line through the snow. Gary had his right hand in his lap and hadn't been using that arm since we'd gotten in the car. I'd asked if it was broken and he'd said he didn't know. When I'd glanced over as we came off the back road before the lampposts started, I could see the shoulder was sitting wrong, slightly too low, and I didn't ask again. 600 yards, he said. I know. The lights are right there. I know, Gary. He turned to me. There was something in his expression I couldn't read clearly in the low light. Not panic, something else. The kind of resolve that appears when a person has already decided they're going to do something and the decision is made before they open their mouth. I'm walking, he said. No. Derek, you're not going anywhere. We wait here with the engine running until someone comes by or until I get a signal to call. Does your phone have signal? I checked. No signal. The area was still in the dead zone before the full town coverage kicked in. That gap I'd tried to explain to him at the start of the night, which felt like it had happened on a different day. Not right now, I said. But when we get closer to the... I can walk 600 yards. With that shoulder, you can't run. I won't need to run. 600 yards of open street with lampposts. It's 5 minutes. Gary. 5 minutes, Derek. I get there, knock on any door, ask them to call a tow truck or the police or anyone, and I come back with someone. You stay here with the engine running. I looked at him. Then I looked at the mirrors. Empty road behind us. Tree line about 60 feet to the right. The left side of the street with houses starting to appear at intervals but still sparse. Still with a lot of space between them. The dense forest of County Road 4 had given way to an urban fringe. That transition zone where the city hasn't fully arrived yet, where there are empty lots between buildings and the vegetation still exists in large blocks. It wasn't forest. But it wasn't city either. You stay in the car, I said. Both of us stay in the car. What if no one comes by? Someone will. What if it takes a while? Then it takes a while. Derek. He used that voice, the older brother voice with 5 years of accumulated authority behind it. Look at my shoulder. I need a doctor. We need to get out of here. I can do this. I wanted to say I didn't know where the animal was. That the 600 yards of open street with lampposts had enough darkness between the lights for a lot of things. That not having seen anything in the last few minutes didn't mean distance. It meant I wasn't seeing. I wanted to say all of it in a way that sounded rational and didn't make it seem like I was inventing reasons to keep us both frozen in a broken-down car in the middle of the snow. But Gary already had his hand on the door handle. "Gary, listen." He opened the door. I grabbed his arm, the left one, and he didn't resist. Just turned to me with that expression I couldn't quite read and said, "You're not going to hold me back again." And he was right. I'd grabbed him a half second too late the last time. He knew it. I knew he knew it. I let go. He got out, closed the door. He got out. Stood still for a second outside, testing the shoulder with a small movement that ended quickly, then started walking toward the lights with that posture of his. Left shoulder slightly forward, steady pace. I watched through the side window until he entered the cone of the first lamppost, 60 yards out. Dark silhouette against the pale snow, the vapor of his breath coming out in visible puffs in the cold. Then I looked at the mirrors. Then I looked ahead. Then I looked back at Gary in the lamppost light. He had moved into the dark stretch between the first and second post when the sound came. Not from Gary's direction. It came from the right, from the empty lots between the last houses and the line of vegetation that still stood out there. That dark block of trees that wasn't dense forest but was thick enough. It wasn't footsteps in the snow. It was vegetation. The same low crash of mass moving through living things that I'd learned to tell, apart from wind over the course of that night. I hit the horn. One long blast. The sound went out loud and absurd in the silence. And Gary stopped, turned, looked back at me from where he was, about 100 yards ahead, between two lampposts, standing still in the snow. The sound in the vegetation stopped along with the horn. Gary looked at me for 3 seconds. Then he turned and kept walking, faster now, the left shoulder going further forward, the pace losing the steady rhythm it had before. I watched. Second post, dark stretch. Third post. The sound in the vegetation didn't come back. I sat with my hand on the gear shift in neutral, engine running, the heater blowing warm air I wasn't feeling. I looked at the mirrors again. Empty road, shoulder. The tree line of County Road 4, dark and still 20 yards back. I looked at the rear window, at the narrow strip of visibility that had come back now that the engine had warmed the defroster. Gary had reached the fourth post. Still visible, still walking, then the fifth post. Then the bend in the street, which curved gently to the left toward the first houses with lit windows, and Gary went around it and disappeared from my field of view, and I was alone in the Explorer with the engine running and the mirrors showing the empty road and the sound of the heater and my own heartbeat, which I was hearing in a way I didn't like. I didn't hit the horn again. I kept my hand on the gear shift and waited. I don't know how long I sat waiting before the sound came. I'd lost track of time at some point. Not dramatically. Not the way you lose it when you pass out or go into shock, but the way time disappears when you're doing something that isn't quite a thing, that's just existing inside a small warm space while everything outside is cold and dark, and you have no control over any part of it. I had my hand on the gear shift, engine running, heater blowing, mirrors showing the road and the snow and the tree line and nothing else. Gary had disappeared around the bend. I kept waiting. The sound came from the right, from the empty lots, and it was different from anything I'd heard that night. Not vegetation, not footsteps, not breathing. It was a sound that took me time to place because my brain kept offering alternatives, kept trying to find the wrong match, kept refusing to close around the only reading that made sense given everything I already knew. It was a wet sound. It didn't last long, less than a minute. Then it stopped. And the silence that remained had that dense quality I knew from the forced stop in the middle of County Road 4, when the engine was off and the snow was covering everything, and there was nothing covering what was out there. I didn't hit the horn, I didn't open the door, I didn't call out Gary's name. I kept my hand on the gear shift in neutral and looked straight ahead at the empty street with the lampposts and the yellow windows set back in the distance. And I breathed through my nose in a regular and deliberate way, because it was the only thing I could do with any competence at that moment. Then came the contact on the rear bumper. It wasn't the lateral contact from before, that drag along the body panels. It was direct pressure, centered, as if something was leaning its weight against the bumper and testing it, measuring it, registering that there was resistance there. It lasted about 8 seconds. Then it moved up. Not a jump, not an impact, but a progression of weight along the rear of the car that I felt in the seat through the chassis, as if something was placing its mass on the trunk lid gradually and methodically. The Explorer's roof flexed, just a little. The kind of flex the car's structure can technically handle, but wasn't designed to handle with that kind of load distribution. I heard the metal give slightly, a low and brief groan, and then the weight redistributed. To the right, then forward, traveling down the rear right pillar to the rear right door, where it settled for about 15 seconds with that steady pressure I already knew. I didn't look out the window. I kept looking forward, at the lampposts, at the yellow windows, at the fine snow falling in the cone of the headlights, which were still on because I hadn't turned anything off. The pressure left the rear right door, footsteps in the snow, pulling away, long, spaced, unhurried. That cadence I'd learned to measure over the course of that night, the one that implied stride length, that implied size. Going right, toward the empty lots, toward the dense line of vegetation standing there at the boundary between the urban fringe and whatever lay beyond it. Then nothing. I went back to waiting. I don't know for how long. There was a point where the yellow windows in the houses set back from the road began going dark, one by one. And there was a point where the sky above the tree line shifted from black to a very dark gray that wasn't light, but was the absence of complete darkness, which is what dawn does first before it does anything else. The gray opened slowly. The snow had stopped at some point I hadn't registered. The windshield was clear except for condensation along the edges, and I could see the street with more clarity than at any moment of the previous night. The lampposts, the houses, the empty lots to the right with the dense vegetation behind them, the snow covering everything with that uniform and untouched layer that dawn makes visible before the first human movement of the day. Untouched wasn't the right word. There were marks in the snow on the lots to the right. I saw them when the light got good enough. Not the churned up snow or running animal leaves, but the impression of something that had stopped, that had stayed stopped for a long time, because the depression was deep and the edges were well defined. 4 points of contact, spaced the way I already knew. It had stood there watching the car. For how long? I didn't know. To the left of the contact points, there was another disturbance in the snow. Not footprints, but the kind of mark an irregular surface leaves when it has prolonged contact with the ground. I looked at that mark for a while and didn't assemble a reading from it. I didn't try. A car appeared at the end of the street at 6:42 in the morning, according to the dashboard clock. Coming slowly because of the snow, headlights still on, and when the headlights hit me straight on, it stopped. It sat there for a few seconds, probably the driver trying to understand what he was seeing. An Explorer tilted on the shoulder with its lights on and the engine running. Then he got out of his car. He was a middle-aged man in an orange jacket, the kind of jacket road workers wear. He walked up to my window and knocked twice with his knuckles. I looked at him. He made the universal gesture for rolling down the window. I looked at the door handle, at the lots to the right, at the marks in the snow, at the man in the orange jacket who was looking at me with the expression of someone who doesn't understand what's happening but is willing to help. My hand was still on the gear shift. The man knocked on the window again, harder this time, and said something I couldn't hear through the closed glass. I sat looking at the door handle for one more moment, at the simple mechanism, the plastic lever I'd operated hundreds of times without thinking. And then I looked again at the lots to the right, at the undisturbed snow between the contact point impressions and the dense line of vegetation at the back, at the quiet, white, empty space that dawn was lighting up without revealing anything beyond itself. I opened the door.